The night in the suburbs of Birmingham, Alabama, was drowned in silence. The headlights of the few passing cars swept across the rain-slicked road, casting shimmering reflections in puddles. The clock had just passed 11 p.m., the kind of hour when most people longed to be home already. Navy Lieutenant Commander Lisa was driving alone. She had been on the road for over 2 hours, her fingers lightly tapping the steering wheel in rhythm with a classic jazz tune from the old radio. She wasn't in uniform, just a plain black sweater and jeans, her hair neatly tied back. Lisa looked like any ordinary woman heading home, until the flashing lights appeared behind her. Red and blue, police lights. Lisa's chest tightened slightly, not out of fear. She was no stranger to tense situations after years in the military, but from exhaustion and a creeping sense of unease. She signaled, changed lanes, and gradually pulled over to the side. Setting the car in park, she took a deep breath and placed both hands on the steering wheel, exactly as she had trained her subordinates to do in similar situations. The patrol car stopped behind her. It took a few seconds. Then the car door swung open. A white police officer stepped out, moving with an unmistakable air of arrogance, his black shoes clicking sharply against the pavement. One hand rested on his belt. The other flicked on a flashlight and shone it directly into Lisa's car, the posture of someone well-versed in commanding and expecting compliance. Lisa glanced in the rearview mirror. Reflected in the flashlight's glow, 3 letters stood clearly on his nameplate: Nixon. "License and registration," he said. No greeting, no explanation. His tone was curt, cold, and loaded with implication. Lisa calmly turned to retrieve her documents from the glove compartment, her voice steady and composed. "Is there a reason I was pulled over, officer?" Nixon didn't respond immediately. He flipped through the documents, glanced around the vehicle, then frowned. "Your tail light's out." Lisa furrowed her brow slightly. "That's impossible. I had the car checked just a few weeks ago." Nixon looked up, cutting her off sharply. "Are you arguing with me?" The air inside the car thickened. Lisa felt the shift, that brief electric moment when authority confronts autonomy. She'd encountered that moment hundreds of times in training exercises and military drills, but never here, on home soil, on a quiet road, with a man sworn to uphold justice. "I'm just saying," Lisa replied gently. "If there's a real issue, I'll get it fixed immediately." Nixon didn't respond. He gave a blunt order: "Step out of the vehicle. Now." Lisa drew a breath. She glanced at the few cars passing ahead. None slowed down. None stopped to witness. "What's the reason, officer?" she asked. Nixon tilted his head, a smirk curling his lips. "Because I said so." Short, baseless, and loaded with menace, that reply began everything that would unfold afterwards. Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped out. No lowering of the head, no bowing of posture. Even though she knew, tonight would not end like an ordinary night. A fabulous night breeze swept across the empty road, brushing through Lisa's neatly tied hair as she stepped out of the car, her hands relaxed by her sides, eyes alert, but not panicked. Her heartbeat remained steady, a reflex of thousands of hours of training under pressure. She knew one thing well: a single misstep could spiral beyond control. Nixon advanced a step, flashlight shining directly into her eyes. "Turn around, hands on the hood," he ordered. Lisa raised her head, not responding immediately. "For what reason, officer?" she asked, calm but clear. Nixon's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, his demeanor shifting from threatening to hostile. "You disobeying a direct order?" he said, practically growling each word. Lisa didn't back down. "I'm just asking a reasonable question. If there's a violation, I'm willing to cooperate. But I have a right to know why I'm being asked to exit the vehicle and place my hands on the hood." He squinted at her, then suddenly raised his radio. "Got a non-compliant subject, preparing to detain," he said coldly. Lisa knew things were escalating far beyond reason, but she remained composed. She could even feel the steady rhythm of her heartbeat in her chest. Calm, unwavering. She lowered her voice, still firm and full of resolve. I know my rights, and I also know your limits. But Nixon wasn't listening. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt and raised them. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, he declared, as if reading from a script that had been decided from the start. Lisa tilted her head slightly and exhaled through her nose. Not out of fear, but with the realization that this was no longer a routine encounter. This was an abuse of power. This was prejudice. Without resistance, she slowly turned around and placed her hands on the cold metal of the hood. Immediately, Nixon grabbed her wrist, twisted it back roughly, and clamped the cold steel cuffs so tightly that she had to grit her teeth against the pain. It wasn't necessary, and he knew it. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Lisa said softly, loud enough for him to hear. But Nixon laughed. Oh no, you're the one who has no idea who you're dealing with. And then, in the quiet of the late night, beneath the flashing red and blue lights reflecting on the wet pavement, Lisa was shoved into the back seat of the patrol car, without any legitimate explanation, without an ounce of mercy. She sat still, her wrists throbbing from the overly tight cuffs, but her gaze never lowered. There was no regret. She knew the whole truth would come to light when the time came, and Nixon would be held accountable. The holding cell was cold, a dim light casting pale shadows across the gray concrete floor. Lisa sat quietly, her wrists still burning, marked red from the cuffs. She didn't complain. She didn't need to say a word. Her eyes, bright, steady, unwavering, spoke volumes. Outside, Nixon was basking in his victory. He leaned against a desk, laughing with a fellow officer, still wearing a smug grin. Someone like her, a night behind bars, is enough to make her remember who's in charge. But then, hurried footsteps approached. A young officer, nervous, clutching a clipboard, rushed in. Sergeant Nixon, he called, voice low but urgent. There's a call from upstairs. They're requesting the holding file and the identity of the person arrested. Nixon frowned and snatched the folder. He skimmed a few lines, and then his eyes froze. Lieutenant Commander, Lisa, he mouthed. A long silence followed. His face, so smug and dismissive just moments ago, was frozen in shock. His hand slowly slipped from the paperwork as if he were holding a ticking bomb. Lisa, behind the bars, still sat upright. Her gaze pierced through the narrow cell window, calm but sharp as a blade. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth was coming, and Nixon had already begun to tremble. The following morning, cold sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of the courthouse, casting long beams across the marble floor. The spacious courtroom gradually began to fill. Spectator benches were occupied. A few journalists had caught wind of the events from the night before. Lisa entered. No more handcuffs, no more forced silence in a jail cell. She wore a navy blue military dress uniform, with medals gleaming under the morning light. Her eyes, confident, without bitterness, but cold as ice. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to justify herself. Her mere presence was enough to bring the entire room to a hush. Across the room, Nixon walked in later, dressed in police uniform, his steps heavy. On his face was something absent the previous night. Worry. He of Judge Kirkland, elderly, composed, and seasoned, struck his gavel to open the session. Let us begin. Lisa's lawyer, Carla Whitman, stood up, firm, to the point. Your Honor, my client, Navy Lieutenant Commander Lisa, was unlawfully arrested in a situation with no justifiable basis. She broke no law. She did not resist. Yet she was handcuffed, detained, and humiliated. All because she asked a single question. Why do I need to step out of the car?" The prosecution remained silent, but the entire courtroom began murmuring. Carla continued, her voice sharp as a blade. "Lieutenant Commander Lisa's military record: spotless. Graduated from the Naval Academy. Multiple commendations for achievement and discipline. No criminal history, no prior offenses, not even a traffic ticket. So why was she thrown into a jail cell like a criminal?" The judge turned to Nixon. "Sergeant Nixon, do you have anything to say?" His voice was hoarse. "She wasn't cooperating, Your Honor." Not cooperating, or simply not bowing down? The prosecution raised a hand and said, "We have body cam footage to present." The entire room held its breath. The screen turned on. The footage rolled, frame by frame. Lisa spoke calmly, not overreacting. Nixon yelling, stepping in aggressively, applying handcuffs. Lisa being dragged away mercilessly, while Nixon smirks at the camera. When the video ended, the room sank into a heavy silence. The judge nodded slowly. "I've seen enough." He struck the gavel. "All charges against Lieutenant Commander Lisa dismissed. Furthermore, I order an internal investigation into the misconduct, abuse of power, and possible discriminatory behavior of Sergeant Nixon." The sound of the gavel echoed, like thunder on a clear day. Nixon lowered his head. Lisa said nothing. She stood up, composed, like someone who had known the outcome. Because justice doesn't need to scream. It only needs to be seen. The court had just adjourned. The judge's gavel was still warm when Nixon hurried out of the courtroom, fists clenched, face pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. He said nothing to anyone, looked at no one. He just walked fast, as if trying to outrun the feeling of being exposed for the first time in his life. But he couldn't escape it. Out in the hallway, waiting for him, stood Police Chief Eldon Baker, a former senior advisor to the department, a man of stern presence with silver hair and piercing eyes. "Nixon," he called. Nixon froze. "My office, now." The office door shut behind them. No more excuses, no more denials. Baker slammed a thick folder onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud, like a verdict dropping onto Nixon's shoulders. "I just got the internal report, and now the ruling from the court. I'll keep this short. You've thrown the honor of this entire force into the trash." Nixon clenched his jaw. "She disrespected me." "Disrespected?" Baker cut him off, slamming a fist on the desk. "Asking a question is disrespect. Or was it because she was a black woman who dared to stand tall in front of you? Don't think I don't know your type." Nixon turned away, silent. "You think you're untouchable? Think you can do whatever you want just because you wear a badge?" Baker stepped forward, his voice low but hitting like a hammer. "You are not the law, and now the law is knocking at your door." Baker took a deep breath. "I've signed the order. You are suspended immediately. A formal investigation by Internal Affairs and the Department of Justice is underway. And let me warn you, if they find similar misconduct in your previous records, your career won't just end. It might end in handcuffs." Nixon went pale. For the first time, the officer who once thought himself invincible realized he was about to lose everything. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of a coffee shop, Lisa sat calmly with a black coffee. The news played on a wall-mounted TV. The Navy Lieutenant Commander, who was unlawfully detained, has been fully vindicated. Officer Nixon now faces a serious disciplinary investigation. Lisa didn't smile. She took a sip of her coffee, eyes gazing out the window. Her victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was that she didn't stay silent. 2 days after the trial, Lisa's name was everywhere in the news. Navy Lieutenant Commander unlawfully detained, speaks out after shocking court case. While social media exploded with thousands of supportive comments and criticism toward Officer Nixon, Lisa maintained an astonishing level of composure. That evening, the Department of Defense sent an official invitation. They wanted Lisa to speak at a forum on justice and service members. The city's mayor also called personally, wishing to host a public recognition ceremony for her resilience. But when a reporter asked her at a small press conference, "Do you see yourself as a hero?" Lisa smiled. "I didn't come here to be a hero. I just refused to be disrespected, not because I'm an officer, but because I'm human." She looked directly into the camera. "I was lucky. Lucky to have knowledge, a lawyer, a clean record, and a rank that offered protection. But what about others? Those without titles, without someone to speak up for them. They're arrested, silenced, and forgotten. I can't represent everyone, but I can say this to those who are listening. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects the abuser." No one in the room said a word, but many eyes welled with tears because they saw themselves in her. Lisa, a black woman, strong, rational, not loud but unyielding, had made an entire system pause and reflect. Right after the speech, she received an email from the Department of Defense. "We would like to invite Lieutenant Commander Lisa to serve as an advisor for our new officer training program on bias awareness and professional ethics." She closed the laptop. No need to reply immediately, because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. That morning, the air was crisp, but somehow lighter. Lisa exited a small cafe in the city center, holding a hot cup of coffee, her gaze fixed on the busy street ahead. Across the road, a black mother was walking with her young son. The boy was laughing, asking his mom something, holding tightly to her hand, as if the whole world only needed one person to hold on to. Lisa paused. She looked at the child for a long moment. Then she smiled, warm, gentle, but filled with a burning resolve. "It's for the children that I can't back down. I didn't stay silent, so they won't have to bow their heads one day." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message from her lawyer. "Nixon has been officially terminated. Internal Affairs are continuing to investigate similar cases he handled." Lisa didn't react with glee. She nodded. This was justice, not revenge. She walked on, each step steady, calm. No longer was the woman wrongfully arrested that night, but someone who had stood up, faced it, and won, not just for herself, but for those who couldn't speak. Lisa's story had spread far and wide. Police training conferences invited her to serve as an advisor. Social organizations began quoting her speech as a model of quiet strength. Black teens sent messages of thanks. "You made me feel like I matter, even if I don't wear a uniform." Under the deep blue morning sky, Lisa looked up, not to avoid anyone's gaze, but to remember. Sometimes, all it takes is one person standing firm for an entire system to be shaken. Final message: power without accountability is power abused, and change only happens when someone dares to speak up.